The Lauren Agee case was hastily closed by authorities, but many questions remain. Come behind the curtain with private investigator Sheila Wysocki as she uncovers the truth about what happened to Lauren. This is Without Warning. Warning: the following episode contains details about sexual violence and elements that are graphic in nature.
In this episode, you are going to hear never-before-heard audio from someone who was very close to Lauren at the time of her death, and someone who really knew her well.
My name is Michael Smith. I am Lauren's stepfather. My relationship with Lauren was, Lauren was she was a Mustang. She was hard to put a bridle on her, and so as a parent, that was always a challenge. But, we had those awkward early teenage years, and she had gotten through really all of that, all of us unscathed, all friendly, all talking still. And I thought that was a great accomplishment. And we were just entering into a new phase where Lauren and I were becoming really good friends. I don't know. I think that's what I'll probably miss the most, because I knew that friendship was really starting to develop, where you could you can't have a friendship as a parent when you're trying to teach, but as you get older, you can have that friendship, and you can see it start to develop, and it was really just starting to change. Lauren was right at 3.5 when we met.
What do you first remember when you first saw Lauren?
What was your first impression of Lauren as she comes in? It's really two impressions. One, it's of Sherry that is trying to make sure that everybody liked Lauren, because she was like, okay, she knew Lauren was a bundle of energy. Even as a 3.5-year-old, she was a bundle of energy. She would just say stuff and she would just do stuff. And it was funny. It was funny to me, but as a parent, again, she was just like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to make an impression on all these people and I want this to go great. But Lauren was she was a fire plug. Even at 3.5, she was a fire plug. When we got married and then everybody moved into the house on Coursey Boulevard together, Lauren got Josh backed up against the wall, and she pointed at him and said, I'm going to make your life a living hell.
How old was she?
We were married, so she probably was, 5 or 6,
That is so funny.
Oh, they ultimately became really good friends, and she had his back and he had her back. And as brothers and sisters do, they drive each other nuts. But at the end of the day, they did love each other. Literally, Sherry was Lauren's left hand and Lauren was Sherry's right hand. The two were just symbiotic. I mean, if it was dance practice, if it was something that Sherry was doing, Lauren would try to be involved with that. I mean, these two were absolutely, really inseparable in a sense that they were just connected. They were connected by the brain almost, if that makes any sense. It was a higher level than just, I don't know. I've seen a lot of mother-daughters, and this was just at a different level. Yeah, I was more the disciplinarian. Sherry could come in at times. She was the atomic bomb, and I was the day-to-day disciplinarian. And so when it got really bad, that's when Sherry would come in. But more so day-to-day, I would take the reins and do that duty. And it was tough. That was real. I'm just telling you, it was very tough. She was a tough cookie. I think Lauren was independent in a lot of ways and dependent in others, because I think she was really dependent on her mother to do a lot of things for her, with her. And she was an independent spirit that loved her own space, her own friends, really her own life in a sense, to just a zest for fun that just never ended. It's always laughing. Absolutely the loudest child you ever met. I mean, her voice just carried. It's a very Demi Moore almost sounding voice, and it just would carry. So, that cackle laugh that she had would carry throughout the whole house. Didn't matter where she was. She could be upstairs in her room. She could be in the bonus room over here. And it literally would just echo throughout the whole house. And I'd have to, it would be 2 a.m. I'd have to make the long walk in and say, okay, guys, come on, hold it down. We're trying to sleep. And then, okay, and then 5 minutes later, you hear the same cackle again, She had such a zest for life. She had such a laugh. And it was all in her laugh. And if you see the videos, you see everything. She's always smiling. She's always laughing. That was just her personality.
You can hear in Mike's voice just how much Lauren made him smile. Every time he mentions her name or tells a story about her, you can hear the chuckle in his voice as he remembers Lauren. Here, Mike is telling a story about Lauren dancing in the car when she was just 10.
There was one time Lauren and I were in the car, and she had to be maybe 10 years old, and she was highly involved in dance, and some song came on the radio. It was some booty shake kind of song, and she's 10, okay, and she can do all these moves. We're in the car, and she's over there dancing, and she's doing it to the song and just looking at me and laughing every time the music would stop and then start again and stop and start again. And it was just it's one of my, it sounds like a simple thing, but that's what makes moments in life great, are these simple moments, right? And she just would stop dancing and look at me in this stupid face and then start laughing and then start dancing again and stop and start. So I don't know why that sticks out in my head as one of the funniest moments.
After hearing all these wonderful stories about Lauren, I was curious to hear what Mike had to say about Wakefest, what he knew about.
I would describe Wakefest as a gathering of kids. It's a big party. It's an excuse to drink on the lake and go maybe watch some guys wakeboarding. I don't know.
He's right. That's exactly what Wakefest is. It's a big party, a place where kids go to drink and watch wakeboarding. But he never thought it would be the place where Lauren would die. Listen as he recalls the day Ryan Melanson reached out to Sherry. Remember, Ryan Melanson was the off-duty police officer from White County who was on the boat with Chris Stout and Aaron Lilly. Ryan Melanson, the off-duty White County police officer, knew things were not adding up. He reached out to Sherry and Mike to talk to him about what he observed.
We had just completed lunch at Bluegrass. We were walking out of the restaurant, and I got a phone call from the funeral home that had taken care of all of our arrangements. And he had said, hey, this deputy sheriff called me and really needs to get a hold of you guys. He sounded pretty urgent. And I'm like, is it with the DeKalb County? Because that's we're already talking with these guys. And he said, no, it's with a neighboring county. He just said he had some information. You had to talk to you and Sherry. And I was like, oh, okay, well, give me his name and number. So he gave me his name and number. And Sherry right there in front of the restaurant called him back. And that's where this whole thing started.
How shocked were you that he called you?
We're still numb from the week. I mean, we just buried Lauren on Friday, and this is a Sunday. So we're the walking dead. We're just there. We don't really even know. I don't even know what we talked about. I don't even remember the week really before. It was just such a blur. My initial reaction was we were just so numb. And we were like, okay, well, let's find out more information. So at that point, we hired an attorney, and he had a private eye. We arranged a meeting actually that afternoon. And so we met with him. It happened really fast. The meeting with Ryan happened really fast. He wanted to meet pretty quick. Mm-hmm. I really was just curious, like what could somebody possibly tell us? Because we had already we'd already been told what happened. 2 days earlier, we saw her lifeless body in a casket. And it was I don't know. It's just to see something like that I don't know. It's hard to recover just in a few days. It's hard to recover in a lifetime just from seeing it. I can't stop seeing that.
To this day, Mike has not recovered from seeing Lauren's lifeless body in a casket. He most likely never will. No parent should have to bury their child. Now listen in as Mike describes what he was told about Lauren's autopsy.
The private detective told me that with Lauren's break in her neck, in her vertebrae, that there was no way that she could walk. He said she would be in a wheelchair for the rest of her life. there was some mention of that was probably a good thing that she didn't live.
And didn't Sherry say she would take Lauren any way she could have gotten her alive? She would have taken care of her had she been in a wheelchair.
Yes, and Sherry would have taken care of Lauren any way she could have, if she would have taken care of Lauren, if she were a quadriplegic, if she was in a vegetable state for the rest of her life.
And one of the things that I think people don't understand is how insensitive a lot of people are in cases. And I find that a very insensitive statement to say to a grieving family. You don't know if she's better off or not. I find that offensive.
I agree. And I again, at the time, we're still so numb. And I think there was an initial 3 months where you're just somewhat numb. But, we've never really been through a murder investigation before. And so we really don't know what to do. And so, you deal with all these different people. You deal with people that you think are good, and they turn out not to be what you want. And then you have to change. And then you have to start over again. And it's a very difficult and arduous task. It really is. Because you don't do that. Nobody goes through this. Funeral preparations. What do we do? I had to call a friend the day after she died and said, what do I do? What do we do here? I don't know what to do. And so we had to you need to call a mortician, call a funeral home. And so I had a friend that ran a funeral home, and he gave me his brother. And so his brother came on out. Bob Bell, great guy, and helped us plot and plan all this. But it was just, there's so much that goes into it that you don't know. How to plan a funeral, how to solve a murder case. You just don't know how to do that. There's no manual.
After sitting down and talking to Mike for a while, I wanted to know exactly when he started losing faith in law enforcement. The very people that were put in place to protect him, and the entire DeKalb County for that matter, were failing him. And I wanted to know when he began to realize it.
I started losing faith in DeKalb the night we found out. I was walking to the boat dock where Deputy Sheriff Jeremy Taylor, myself, and Brian were walking down to the boat dock where Fish Lips was the Page 4 Marina boat dock. And he was pointing over there where, okay, that's where they were camping, and that's where they were. And, we may never find out what happened to her. And when he said that, it just struck a chord in me. I'm like, why is this guy telling me we're the first night and he's telling me we may not ever find out what happened to her? I mean, why are you telling me that day one? That just made no sense to me. It's almost like you were not going to even try from that point forward. It just struck me as odd when he said that.
Did you feel like they tried from that point forward?
No, I didn't feel like they tried from that point forward. I feel like they went through the motions. I feel like they tried to prove it was an accident. I think it was, and that's just where they were going with it. And, they just tried to say everything pointed back to an accident. His Detective Taylor was here talking about he had some news for us that, he couldn't tell us what it was, but it was important to the case. And we were thinking, okay, it's something in our favor that's going to prove that, something happened. And then when we had our meeting with Sheriff Ray and Jeremy Taylor, myself and Brian, the thing he had to tell us was all the kids' stories matched. Their stories never changed. And I'm like, but that's not the case. Their stories did change. And he was like, no, their stories with me never changed. That made no sense to me. I mean, it changed 2 times, 3 times in my house that one night with Hannah. I mean, it was just, I started taping the conversations because the first private eye was taping all of his conversations. And I thought, well, that's he's doing that just so he doesn't miss anything. But honestly, I can't remember everything everybody says. So to me, if I record a conversation, I can remember everything. I don't miss anything. I don't miss how they said something. Not only what they said, but how they said it. And that's important too, So I started recording just about every conversation relating to the case from that point forward. When Detective Taylor told us that Lauren did not make it, Sherry's first reaction was, where are the people she was with? So she knew something was up from the beginning. I was not so quick to go to that conclusion. I was in the camp of, they were telling us she jumped off a cliff earlier that day. She might have had some kind of hemorrhaging that was internal bleeding or something, and she died that night. It was going 50 stories. She went to go use the restroom, and she must have fallen off the cliff while she was going to use the restroom. But it was a full moon out, so it's kind of bright. So how are you going to do that? Lauren was terrified of heights. So, I mean, nothing made sense. But again, I go back to being numb, and you're just somewhat numb that at that point, and you can't think, and you're not thinking on that level. Sherry was already thinking there, but we're just going through the mourning process of just trying to process the information.
So when you were talking to Jeremy Taylor on the phone, do you feel like he listened to you and Sherry about the investigation, or do you feel like he had a phone call, hung up, and didn't think about y'all again?
My opinion is we had a phone call, he hung up and did not think about us again. I think he had his mind made up as to what it was, and he went in that direction, plain and simple. Okay,
I've been asked this several times about you. The conversation between you and Jeremy Taylor and Sheriff Ray, you were so composed. How did you stay composed in that situation when they were telling you the things that they were telling you?
Well, I didn't realize I was composed, but if I was, we were really, I guess if I had some composure, it was because we knew what they were going to say. And we were eager to get it closed, because if they closed the case, then we could go on our own investigation. If they kept it open for a year or two or three, then we couldn't touch it. So actually they were doing what we wanted, and that was closing the case and saying, okay, it was an accident. Okay, so now we can take over and do what we do. We'll hire real detectives, and we'll hire attorneys, and we'll process this case, let the science figure it out, right? And so we were excited. Our attorney at the time told us just to listen and get out of there. And we did that, but I really wanted to prod and ask some questions and see why they came up with some things and why they thought this and why they thought that. And again, my feeling throughout the entire time is that they thought they were writing this off as an accident. They were not going to see it any other way. And any interview, anything that they were doing was only to prove their case.
You know, Sherry's been criticized for not going to that case by Sheriff Ray, of all people. Why didn't she go to that meeting?
That was it was a decision that we all made, that she was not going to go to the meeting. She was so angry at that point at Jeremy Taylor and Sheriff Ray that I don't think she trusted herself to sit in the chair and listen to it. She was very hurt and angry, and to hear them talk about Lauren the way they were, drunk girl falls off cliff, was basically their in synopsis, the conclusion of what they were, of the whole investigation, air quotes. You can only hear that so much. You just want to come out of the chair and start swinging. It's all right in front of you. You're just not seeing it. And it just was all right there. They just wouldn't see it. And it was just so frustrating.
Or didn't want to see it?
Well, they didn't want to see it. I don't know if it's, I don't know what the deal was with those guys. Ineptness, or just they were overwhelmed, or they were underfunded, or I don't know what it was, but they just did not want to put the time, effort, and energy into investigating the Lauren Agee case. They did not want to do it.
They didn't count on Sherry and you, did they?
Well, I tell you what, they didn't count on Sherry. She is what they didn't expect. I don't know what else to say about that. She just, this has become her life quest. This has become the single most important thing in her life. And I think it will always be the single most important thing that she ever does.
This has become Sherry's life mission, to get justice for Lauren and find out the truth about what happened. Here, I asked Mike the first time he saw the clip with Jeremy Taylor and what his first impression was. So let's talk about when you went up there. Wasn't, when you first heard about the clip and you saw it with Jeremy Taylor, you kind of got an idea, but when you go up there and you look down, what was your impression of the story that she fell off the cliff into the water?
Well, there just wasn't a way to get to the water. if you just have to really try to get to the water. I guess there was maybe a way or two that you could fall off and get there, but they were throwing the dummy off and they couldn't get it in the water. They threw it off a bunch of different places. Couldn't get it in the water, probably 50 times. The sky above you was clear. There wasn't a whole lot of trees above you, so the moon would have been shining right down. It's like a 20-watt bulb all over the whole area, so you could see just fine. You can see where the cliff is. She's not going to walk off of a cliff. It's just not going to happen. If you go up there, you'll see it. It just changed my whole perspective of the entire scene when you go up there and see how this thing actually was laid out, what they're talking about. There's no way on the one side, it was just a very tree-riddled, angled. There's no way somebody could have gotten from the top to the bottom. It was probably 50 feet of rolling somebody would have to do through trees and rock. That wasn't going to happen. And then on the cliff side where the boat dock was, I think it had to be, it was more straight down there, but there was trees and everything that would hang you up. And then at the bottom, there was rocks. Because the lake was down, I guess. It was just seemed to be probably 12 to 15 feet of shoreline just exposed. So you couldn't hit the water. You would hit the rock.
I agree with Mike. There is no way Lauren fell off that cliff. I know when I went up there, it changed my entire perspective. When you hear a cliff in your mind, you think straight down. And the media made you think that as well. When you go up there and you actually see it, that's not the case. The cliff is at an angle, so it slants. So if somebody were falling, they would hit brush and trees and rocks.
When it's described on the media, they always show her in that hammock that's right over the edge, and she didn't sleep in the hammock right over the edge. That was just for a photo op. Hearing the news describe it and then going up there, it was two different things. It really was. Just the way they described it and the way it was changed my whole perspective. Because you get up there and you go, there's no way somebody could have just fallen off this cliff. No way.
I agree. So you got 2 police officers, or was it 1 or 2 that came to the door?
There's one came to the door here.
Okay. You get in the car and you're driving, I assume.
Well, honestly, we just didn't think anything of it at the time. An officer is at the door and he says, your daughter's been in an accident. You need to drive to the DeKalb County Hospital and pick her up. And I was like, well, why isn't she calling me? What's going on? He goes, well, that's all I can tell you, which I think is the absolute worst way to tell somebody, because, we get in the car and it's like, oh my gosh, she's hurt. I guess maybe she's unconscious or something she can't call. The last thing in your mind is that she's dead. Okay. And so we get in the car and it's about an hour away from here. So we're in the car and it's going pretty good clip. And then all of a sudden the reports start coming in, like something up there happened. Something happened at the lake. They pulled a body out of the water. We heard that. And then all of a sudden we were just about to get on the interstate and it just got real. All of a sudden you go from, we're just going to pick up Lauren, to she may be dead. And we went from 75 to 120 miles an hour. I was going 120 from, it just seemed to be messed up how they told us. They should have given us taken us to the hospital. I shouldn't have been driving. I was dangerous for all of a sudden now the adrenaline's going, you're in this car going crazy. You had to get off and go down a 2-lane road. I'm passing cars going, 90 on this 2-lane road, trying to get to the hospital thinking that she's dead or possibly, I don't know what she is, but we're all panicked. Everybody in the car's panicked. We're praying, we're crying, and Sherry's on the phone trying to call people. And we get to the hospital. We walk in, we're running in, and I knew something really bad because we walk in and there was 5 nurses there at the station in the middle, and every head just went straight down when we walked in the door. And I said, she didn't make it. And we're stuck in this back room for about 15 minutes and nobody would come see us. Nobody was sticking their head in to check on us. And we're like just pacing like tigers in a cage. And, then they brought us back in this little room, and Jeremy Taylor said, your daughter didn't make it. And it was just, it just changes your whole life right there. Just those few seconds. I just knew what he was going to say, and just seeing it come out of his mouth was just, I hit my legs just gave out. I just hit the floor. Everybody in the room just was, it's the worst moment in time you could ever think of.
Care.com has come on board as a proud sponsor of Without Warning podcast. I already knew as a consumer the benefits of Care.com. Moving into a new neighborhood, a new house, and a new town, I needed a way to find easy and reliable help. Where I found it? Care.com. Care.com is the largest digital marketplace for care. Care.com did all the hard work. All I had to do was go on there to find housekeepers, dog walkers, senior care. You can also get tutors, someone who runs errands for you, full or part-time. Think about this. You can find, book, and pay for care all in one place. To save 30% off of a Care.com premium membership, visit care.com/without warning or enter promo code without warning when you subscribe. Daily Harvest is a proud sponsor of Without Warning podcast. I try to post real-time videos that generally the videos are a disaster because I'm terrible at taking selfies. My friend Sarah Moore came over to do a video with me on Daily Harvest. She too is a huge fan. We talked about how Daily Harvest delivers thoroughly sourced, chef-created foods that are built on fruits and vegetables and can be prepared in 5 minutes. With both of our schedules being so crazy, she has a boy and girl, runs her own business, is a single mom, and Daily Harvest is an answer for her. I run a business, travel all the time, have company over all the time that expect to be fed. Daily Harvest is an answer for me too, and I know that when I am giving a guest Daily Harvest, they are getting quality foods. Sarah's a nutritionist. She came over and told me all the benefits of each ingredient. Sarah went over each ingredient, telling me and showing me how Daily Harvest maximizes the nourishment of the ingredients. Go to dailyharvest.com and enter promo code WOW to get 3 cups free in your first box. That's promo code WOW for 3 free Daily Harvest cups at dailyharvest.com. dailyharvest.com. At the hospital, Jeremy Taylor told Mike and Sherry that Lauren didn't make it. When they left the hospital, that's when they went with Jeremy Taylor to see the clip for the first time. Listen as Mike describes that moment in more detail.
Jeremy was telling me about the cliff. He was telling me about them cliff day. He was telling me about their day and telling me every reason it was probably an accident or we may never find out what happened to him. It's just, he wasn't giving me a lot of hope. There was never even a shade that something other than an accident happened. There was never even a glimpse of we're investigating something other than an accident. You could tell from his delivery to me, he was going with accident.
Talk to me about the ride home then.
I do a lot of work in Knoxville, so I drive that road a lot. And when I hit that exit, I just tear up because I just remember that ride home and how quiet everybody was, and just this absolute you're just stunned. It's like you're drunk in your mind. You just, 1,000 million things are racing through your head, and this impossible thing that never could possibly happen has just happened. And It was the longest ride home I've ever had. It was an hour in the car, and it just seemed like eternity. It did. I don't wish that on anybody.
To this day, Mike says he thinks of that moment every time he drives past that exit. He said he also knew that Jeremy Taylor was going to rule this an accident from the moment he spoke to him. He said, I just knew by the way he was talking to me that they weren't going to consider investigating this case. But because they were law enforcement, he decided to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Well, he seemed, other than his comment that we may never find out what happened to her, which threw me off a bit, but okay, they're police officers, so I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. They seemed concerned. They seemed, we're going to get to the bottom of this. We'll see what happened, blah, blah, blah. Jeremy, communication with him was a little bit of a problem. We had arranged some weekly meetings. We said, let's have a weekly phone call at Thursday to catch up. Well, that happened once, and then it never happened again. Information coming through was just tough to get information from these guys. They both showed up here at our house, which our attorney said was weird because it was unannounced. It was just they showed up. And it was just, I don't know, it was an odd meeting, but they stayed here a while and just were going through everything. And I don't know, it was just an odd meeting. I guess they were either feeling us out or I don't know what they were doing, but it was, really no new information. They were just numb.
Do you think they were checking you out to see what kind of people you were, if you had the financial wherewithal to do something?
I guess it's easy for me to say yes to that question, but I do think so. I think that's, why not? They're just, how far are these guys going to, how loud are they going to yell if we say this is an accident? Because they know we're thinking it's not an accident. We're giving them information. We're giving them clues. We're giving them people to call. We're giving them a lot. We're doing the investigation somewhat, just on the sidelines over here. So they know we're not, and they met Sherry, and they know she's not going to back down. They know that.
Do you think they had Lauren's best interest at heart?
I think they were getting through this case as fast as possible. I think they were looking at their own interest, and that was, let's move on to the crackheads and the meth dealers in DeKalb County. I don't want to spend the time, effort, and energy on this case. That's my opinion. I don't think they really thought about it as a person. Lauren, they come in here, they're nice, they're cordial. I'm sorry for your loss, all that kind of stuff. And Sheriff Ray was nice to us. He was nice to our face. He was very sympathetic to our cause. He had a son as well, and he said if I lost him, I'd be really upset as well, and I'd do everything in my power to find out what happened.
Sheriff Patrick Ray was an elected official who was doing what he needed to do, and even though Mike thought he sincerely felt remorseful, he knew that they were not going to put any time, effort, or energy into investigating this case. In Mike's word, quote, they had more important things to do, end of quote. After discussing this with Mike, I began to wonder when he first learned about Lauren's injuries.
At the hospital, they didn't know really. They knew she had her neck was injured, and that was about it. When we asked, can we go see her that night, Jeremy had said, you can go see her if you want, but I don't recommend it. She's not in good condition, and you don't want to remember her that way. And I regret not seeing her that night. I guess I wanted to see her, and I didn't. Nobody did. Said by Jeremy Taylor, her head was split open like a watermelon. Well, I don't think he ever really went over the autopsy with us, per se. It was just explaining some things in the autopsy, which was never the case. Her head was never split open like a watermelon. In fact, it was very intact. She had some abrasions on her neck. I think she had a broken neck, if I'm not mistaken. And she had a broken nose. She had some knuckle damage and scrapes and scratches. But it was nothing. When I saw some of the autopsy photos, which I can't believe I looked at some of them, but I did. She didn't seem like in absolutely horrible condition.
Like someone who fell off a cliff, the cliff that you now know what it looks like?
Because it was described to us like she had fallen off this really. The impression I got was she had fallen off the high side of the cliff onto the rocks. Her head was splattered, and she rolled into the water. That's the visual that basically I got from them.
Right.
Okay? And that's really, at least her body, at least her head wasn't splattered. That's not the case.
Why do you think that the DA would be upset with two police officers coming forward?
That's a good question. Why would a DA be upset with why would a DA be upset with two police officers, and that's under his jurisdiction? I think it's the same region, unless they're just upsetting the narrative. This case is done, it's gone. Let's just let it go. Let's let this die a slow death or a quick death. We don't need to revisit this. You guys need to stop and let this go. It's just, that's the narrative there. He doesn't want to deal with this. 2 weeks after she passed away, I went up to the site myself. I wanted to see let me see the grounds. Let me see where she passed away. Where'd she camp? Let me see this whole thing. I got to see this because we're in the investigation mode. Okay, we're like, we got to get to the bottom of this, right? And so you go up there and you're like, there's no way. I mean, honestly, you go up there, there's no way this could have been an accident. There's no way. Something had to happen up here just by the way it's laid out, okay? Just by the way it's laid out. So we're up there and we're not interfering with anything because they've already opened it up to the public. It wasn't interfering with an investigation. People could have camped up there since. But we get up there, we're looking around, Dee and Harry, which Harry is the owner he manages the boat dock, and Dee runs the store. They were there at the time. Harry was the one driving the pontoon that held the two young men at the time he was on the boat with either Ryan or Chris. I think it was Ryan.
Ryan.
But he was the one that told me, man, these guys were acting, if they weren't guilty of something, I don't know. They knew something. They wanted out of there in a bad way. Something was up with those guys. Harry, Dee, they all had a story. I get back to the dock, Tony Smith comes up. He was the owner of the dock. He's, hey, I got a guy over here that said he saw something that night. So I'm not looking for information, but I'm there at the dock, and just people are coming up left and right saying, hey, I spent some time with that group. I heard something's not right about this. And then somebody else comes up. Something's not right about this. It's like everybody, I'm at the dock and everybody's coming up to me saying, something's not right here. Something smells. And I'm thinking, no, have you guys not told the police this? And they said, well, nobody's even interviewed us. Nobody's even asked us one question. And these are all people that had talked to all these people right at the time of all this was happening. It's insane for me to think that none of them were ever interviewed. And I think Dee and Harry were eventually interviewed, but it was more so like, hey, what do you got? I heard you got something. What's going on? But I'm there on the docks, and Tony Smith, the owner of the boat dock, says, hey, I think there's a guy over here, and he said he saw a fire up on top of the mountain that night. His name is Mike Chambers. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, let's go talk to Mike Chambers, right? No harm in that, right? So we go over, and there's Mike Chambers, and I recorded that conversation, and he said, yeah, it was Sunday night. It was probably 9-10 o'clock, and there was a fire going up there. It was just, it was a pretty good fire. So I'm like, well, that's pretty valuable information, right? So I did tell Jeremy Taylor that, I said, hey, this Mike Chambers guy saw a fire up there that night. He's like, no, that whole area was roped off. This is Jeremy. He said, that whole area was roped off by TWROA, so nobody could have gotten up there. He said, what he saw was probably a fire on the ridge behind where that was. He didn't see a fire up there. So I'm thinking, I just gave this guy some pretty valuable information. And he, judge and jury right there, just discarded what I said. And I at that point, I knew we weren't going anywhere with these guys.
And when did you find out TWRA did not rope off the area?
Oh, that had to be a year later. A year later, we found out they didn't even rope off the area. I mean, it wasn't roped off. It wasn't cordoned off. Anybody could have gotten up there. Anybody could have gone through that stuff. Anybody could have burned anything.
What do you want to happen in Lauren's case?
That's a great question. What's going to give us peace? What do you want here? Because Lauren's not coming back. So how do you define success? And to me, I define success, and Sherry and I have talked about this, and it's really just for the FBI or somebody to open this case back up and truly investigate it. It's not somebody's head on a platter. It's not somebody go to jail. It's not anything like that. It's not revenge. It's just about, I want it investigated properly with all of the facts, the figures, the people, everything investigated properly, because it wasn't investigated properly. And once that's done, I'll have the faith, whatever they say happened, then I'll believe it. But it's not about somebody's head on a platter. It's not about revenge. It's not about somebody going to jail. It's just about finding the truth. And once the truth is found, then we do justice. And if the truth is it was an accident, it was an accident. But there's still some justice to be had here because people knew what happened.
Justice is all this family is looking for, not putting someone in jail or getting revenge. They just want this case to be investigated properly, the way it should have been done in the first place. So, without the help of DeKalb County, some help from the media, and a lot of personal resources, Sherry, Mike, and Lauren's entire family will continue to fight for justice.
The media has helped this case move forward. Call it trial by media. I don't care what you call it. We've got to move this case forward somehow, some way. We don't have the DeKalb County Sheriff's Department helping us. We do have our own team helping us, our own legal team, our support team, our forensics, our this, our that. We're having to do this ourselves. And so who are you going to give that to? The local news. We've had great response out of the local news. It's helped move this case forward. You know, what's the ultimate goal? The ultimate goal is for the FBI to take this case and to move forward with it. And that happens through public awareness, people moving the ball forward. We've got a petition with over, at this point, 15,000 signatures on it. That it's fantastic. That helps. The news reports help. I mean, 2020, my gosh, a national program, Crime Watch Daily, a national program. Obviously, these people see something here.
We got tips off of it.
And we're getting tips off of all that stuff. So why isn't the FBI jumping in, and hopefully they will soon, and opening up this case? So that wouldn't happen if we didn't have Crime Watch Daily. That wouldn't have happened if we don't have these podcasts. That wouldn't happen if we don't have 2020 and the notoriety to it. So I don't care how it gets done. It's just getting done. Early on in this case, when we first met with you, you said, let's let the science prove this. And that has rung in my head ever since we started this investigation. And it's really gave me a sense of peace because I knew that the science would prove this. And I knew if you go up there, you can see there's no way she could get to the water. There's no way she would have floated back into this cove when the currents were sucking the water towards the dam. There's no way. I mean, from the shoes to the phone to there's 100 different reasons why this is not just an accident. And the science is going to prove everything. And you're right. I mean, those words have been comfort for me from the beginning. And it's just a matter of time before the science absolutely 100% proves that this was no accident.
I am convinced the science in this case speaks for itself, and it will absolutely 100% prove that this was no accident. Waiting for justice to be served can be the hardest thing, especially when it's justice for your own child. I have loved working on this case and with this amazing family, and have loved being a part of helping to find justice for Lauren. Thank you all for listening, calling in tips, sending emails, and helping me with crowdsourcing justice. Bringing this episode of Michael Smith to you was very important to me. I believe that Michael Smith is the unsung hero in this case. Michael has been Sherry's support system and her rock throughout this horrible injustice. On our next episode, I am so excited to have Alina Burrows. Alina is a former senior certified crime scene analyst. She will take us behind the scenes in Casey Anthony and the Pulse mass shooting cases. Also, stay tuned for Without Warning, the Christian Andreacchio case. We'll go behind the scenes to discuss what's going on in that case.
Lauren's family gives their full permission for any and all details to be shared in hope that the truth will come out. If you know anything at all, call 1-888-599-0008 or email tips@SheilaWysocki.com.